With that, I just tweeted at him. We're now joined by Jeff Howe, Longhorn Blitz 247 Texas, covers the Longhorns. And, man, there's so much intrigue with what they have with so many new bells and whistles and weapons, and then others back as well. Jeff, thanks for your time. Has this been, and maybe what Texas needed, is just down, get your hands dirty type of spring, or has it been that kind of mentality?
It's kind of been that way, Smokey. Kind of a boring spring, I guess. Not a lot of hoopla going on. I think the quarterback battle. I think for me covering it, having been in this exact situation last year with just a few different faces, Casey Thompson out, Quinn Ewers in. I think everybody knew going in wasn't going to be decided by tomorrow night. It's not going to be decided by tomorrow night. It's going to take the summer and maybe a couple of camp scrimmages. But yeah, I think in a lot of ways, Smokey was kind of a back to basics spring, really just focusing on some of that fundamental stuff that let Texas down last year. Attention to detail, tackling, blocking, just kind of your X's and O's. And I think, Steve Sarkisian understands that they've got a lot of work to do, but I think overall, he's pretty pleased. Whether you're talking about the quarterback battle, some reshuffling they've done in the secondary, a couple guys emerging on defense and some spots where they needed to have some guys step up and feel like they've got guys they can count on now at the spot. I think he feels like they've had a really productive spring, and I think that's probably what Texas fans will see tomorrow night, a team that still got some work to do, but in some key spots compared to last year, maybe ahead of where they were going into 21.
If Hudson Card beats out Quinn Ewers eventually for the starting job, will they be back in the same spot they were last year with him and Casey Thompson, or will that mean that Hudson Card has really taken big steps forward?
I think he's taken steps forward, Paul. The big thing in this quarterback battle, we've seen it in the few practices that we've been able to see. You hear it from sources, and there's video clips floating out there. You can't deny the arm talent that Quinn Ewers has. And when he's locked in, when everything is right, he looks every bit the kid he looked like in South Lake Carroll, just doing it at this level with his ability to just flat out fling the football. But Hudson Card has by no means been bad this spring. I think what's really been interesting to see is the growth of both of these guys, both from different levels. For Quinn Ewers, it's just kind of digesting the offense one day, taking it in, and then taking that to the classroom or the practice field or whatever the next day, and then just kind of building on it. They haven't tried to give him too much and kind of do a sink or swim mentality with him. They've really just kind of steadily brought him along, and I think that's really helped his growth. With Hudson Card, there is some next level stuff he can do now in terms of really digging in to the kind of the nitty gritty and getting granular with this offense and what Sark and AJ Millie and that staff want to do. So again, two guys at different stages of growth, but I think the growth trajectory for both has been really good. But there's a reason, Paul. Look, if you just wanted to go today, if Sark had to make a call today, you'd say, okay, does he go with go with the guy that's more talented with more upside? But there's a reason why he hasn't called this competition yet, and that's because Hudson Card, I think, in a different way than he did last year, is going to make this a really tough call for Sark at the end of the day.
Jeff, you'll bear with me, a two-parter of a question here. First of all, your thoughts on the recent transfer addition of Ajayi Hall, the wide receiver from Alabama, and in line with that, you've got Quinn Ewers, you've got Watts, you've got Billingsley, you've got Nayor, you've got Hall now. There's been a number of incoming transfers. So your thoughts on Hall, and then also of those guys that have come in, who do you think is the most important pickup outside of Ewers, obviously, as a quarterback that they brought in?
Yeah, with Hall, Craig, there's no doubt. I mean, the kid is insanely talented. It's funny. How's this for randomness? So Ajayi Hall's high school coach in Florida, I actually played high school football with in Florence, Texas, USA. As weird, as crazy as that is. So I've gotten a little bit of insight on the kid. He is a kid that is a little bit of a wild card, a kid you have to reel in, but that is doable, and it is something that if he's put in the right environment. Now, that brings up a whole different ball of wax of is the current culture within the football program at Texas the right environment for him to thrive in. Time will tell. But this kid is insanely talented, and in terms of pure talent, I think you're really only talking about Xavier Worthy in terms of being better than him. And I know that's a relative term, but if you just stack everybody up and look at him on paper, that's the only guy I think that you would definitively take over him. But there's going to be a lot of work to be done to get him to the point where he can get into that top 4 or 5 wide receiver group. As far as the other pickups, it's really a tough call for 2 different reasons for me, Craig. On one hand, I really like Isaiah Nayor, the vertical playmaking dynamic he brings to the table, and that he's brought to the table this spring. Xavier Worthy was a guy that could stretch the field, but I think now when you've got a guy that you can stick on the field side and legitimately threaten to take the top off of defense every play, that can go down the field and make contested catches, a guy that once Jordan Whittington went down last year, Texas really didn't have a guy that could do that. And, Whittington's injury, it was really compounded because when he went out, that was when the schedule flipped and you ran into Oklahoma State and Baylor and Iowa State and some of the tougher defenses that you had to play last year. You had to do that without Whittington on the field. So I just think Nayor, the dynamic he brings to the table, is really impressive. With Jaleel Billingsley, I really struggling to remember the last time Texas had a tight end. I mean, seriously, you might have to go all the way back to Jermichael Finley to find that a tight end Texas had that could legitimately threaten a defense vertically the way this kid can. Now, is he an elite blocker? No. Are there things he can't do that you would like an every down tight end to do? Yeah, there are things he can't do you would like an every down tight end to do. But with as much 2 tight end personnel as Steve Sarkisian likes to run, to have a guy that you can put him in line, you can put him at that H-back, you can shift him around, you can flex him, put him in the slot, do whatever. They haven't had a guy like this in a really, really long time, and it's giving them kind of a little buffer to get a couple of young guys like Jatavion Sanders and Gunnar Helm, kind of get them up to speed a little bit. So for different reasons, I think Nayor and Billingsley both are huge for this offense.
Well, we had Aaron Suttles, who covers Alabama for theathletic.com, and we asked him about Hall, and we kind of knew a little bit about him, but he couldn't stop talking or raving about Billingsley and did not understand why it didn't work last year at Alabama. That's always been great at using their tight ends. So that was the one he mentioned as well. It's good to hear you say that. So they have all this stuff. Do they have the nuts and bolts on the offense and defensive line?
It's a $64,000 question, Smokey. I mean, look, I've been asked on different podcasts and interviews, even my podcasts and my shows and my writing. Hey, if you look at it on paper, you can say Texas has the best collection of offensive skill talent in the Big 12, and I don't know how many people would successfully argue that they don't. That and $5 will get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks because they've got so many issues still on the offensive line, and defensively they were so bad last year. Just at every level. I mean, they couldn't stop the run. They couldn't get after the quarterback. They couldn't play the ball in the air. There was really, at the end of the day, nothing that defense did last year that I think you could even look at and say, yeah, they were probably average at doing that. Everything was below average, just bad. Now, from an offensive line standpoint, you're really kind of, if you're Sark and Kyle Flood, you really got kind of what's the best bad idea you've got right now? Do you take what you got and just try to make it work and scheme around it, or do you get to a point, and I think in some respects Kyle Flood is probably already at this point, just with their numbers, I think he has to be, and just say, look, when DJ Campbell and Nato Meazulu and Kelvin Banks, when these guys get to campus, you've got to get them here in June right out the bat with the mindset of you guys need to be ready for that season opener against Louisiana Monroe to play and maybe start. I think that's what you got to do. And I don't like starting through freshman offensive linemen. I think that's a really slippery slope. But I just don't think they have a choice. And there's a reason they recruited those guys. They're going to play the long game. They want to develop those guys and build it the right way. But I think they're just going to need to have some of those guys play because they just at some point they're just not going to have options if they just prove to be better in camp, or if you have some guys struggle. On the flip side of it, on defense, Smokey, they've got the bodies and they've got guys that are kind of proven commodities on that defensive line. And the guy that I've heard so much about this spring has been Tavondre Sweat, who's been a really productive player for them. I think last year you kind of saw him make some strides toward the end of the year, and I think a lot of that had to do with just missing so much time in the offseason recovering from a shoulder surgery. With Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton, you've seen the flashes, but you're just looking for the consistency. I think with Moro Ojimo, it's kind of the opposite. He's a steady hand, but can you get those splash plays that you need from a defensive tackle in the system? And they've really overhauled what they've done on the edges. Justice Finkley is a mid-year guy, has already made an impact. I think that, Texas fans will see a lot of number one on the edge on Saturday, him getting some reps, right next to Ovia Gofu. Baron Sorrell's a guy that played a little bit as a true freshman last year, who's gotten himself into that mix. And there's a reason they're still pushing really hard for O'Shawn Mathis, TCU transfer, a guy who's a proven edge guy, proven pass rusher in this league, because they need as many bodies as they can who can win one-on-ones at the point of attack. They just didn't get enough of that last year. So I at least think, Smokey, from the line of scrimmage standpoint, they've got the pieces to be much better on defense. I just think at offense, you've just got to figure out at this point kind of what's your best bad idea and be prepared to go with it.
Is the world, and particularly the one of Austin, Texas, ready to let, and we did a topic last week about those ESPN power rankings that had Texas sixth and all that. It's not fair to Steve Sarkisian and to Texas to expect him to be 5-7 to great. I mean, can they let them grow at a reasonable rate as opposed to dry, barren crop into, tall ears of corn? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I like to think so, Paul. Here's why. I think I think we've talked about this before, but I think it's anytime I'm on with you guys, I think it's a good point to make, and I like hammering it home anytime that I can. Yeah, I get asked quite a bit. So what is the difference between Texas and Baylor? Why is Baylor, just from a football standpoint, why has Baylor been able to do this with three different head coaches? They've been able to kind of revamp it, and Texas has just been spinning their wheels. And I said because each time Baylor has needed to make a head coaching change, you go back to starting with Art Briles, they've done what Baylor's done, in my opinion, is I think what Texas did with Sark, is you took a good, honest, long look in the mirror at where you are, where you can be in the short term, and where you want to go. I don't think they did that with Charlie Strong, and in hindsight, I don't think they really did that with Tom Herman. But this is the first hire in the post-Mac Brown era where I felt like from an administrative standpoint, from a booster donor standpoint, from however you want to couch it, the powers that be that make the decisions in Texas all kind of decided, look, here's an honest assessment of where we are. This is where we feel like we can go in the short term to get to where we want to be in the long term. And that's why you can have, I think that's why from a fan base standpoint, I think by and large fans understand, they're not going to gamble on some guys in the transfer portal. They've taken guys as they needed them, but with the lines of scrimmage, they're going to load up on the lines of scrimmage in the recruiting class. They're going to try to really build this thing the right way. And I actually think the transition to the SEC from that standpoint, guys, I think it helps Texas because now if you want to play the long game, you've got that card you can pull with this fan base of saying, hey, yes, we want to be good in 2022, but we're trying to build this thing to where whether it's 23, 24, 25, whenever you go into the SEC, that you're in a much better position to compete in that league than you are right now. And that's going to take some time and building it the right way. So, guys, it's never 100% patience when you're talking about a place like Texas, but really since Sark was hired and even through the struggles last year, I haven't seen that kind of patience from this Texas fan base, and especially at an administrative level through all these struggles throughout the last 10 plus years.
Jeff, any more indication on just how involved Gary Patterson is or what effect he's had in his short time on campus?
Yeah, it's interesting, Craig. He's even guys on the team will tell you, I really don't know what his technically job title involves, but he's kind of doing a little bit of everything right now. And I think it goes back to what somebody close to him told me, when these discussions first got started, late November, early December. I think Gary Patterson looked at Texas with two things. One, I think there was an opportunity, his relationship with Chris Del Conte and their conversations. I think Gary Patterson kind of saw an opportunity to, and he said this on the record, to kind of be for Sark what Dick told me was, for Mac Brown in terms of a guy that can help set your culture, a guy that can be a sounding board, and a guy that can just kind of help you from an administrative standpoint check your blind spots. I think that's part of it. I think the other part, kind of more to the question, Craig, is he really wanted to get back to helping Texas get ready to make this transition to the SEC, and to do that really get back to who he is at his core, which is a guy who's great in terms of player development and talent evaluation. And from that standpoint, he's been really good with guys in terms of breaking down film and helping guys understand, tendencies, technique, and just breaking it down at a pretty rudimentary level. I've heard he's helped guys tremendously from that standpoint. I think that's why this role, just taking a step back from that daily grind that is being a college head coach and really kind of getting back to who he is at his core, I think it's going to, and it has already kind of recharged him a little bit. But that's kind of what it is, Craig. He is going to help in terms of scheme and things of that nature, kind of do and be whatever Sark needs him to do and wherever he needs him to be. But again, I just think getting back to helping, in terms of player development and doing some self-scout, that to me is where I've heard that he's really made the biggest impact so far this spring.
They have one more piece that they would like to add in the transfer portal with O'Shawn Mathis, the star from TCU that Patterson knows. He's been obviously heavily recruited. Others want him as well. Will you be shocked if he doesn't end up in Austin?
At this point, Smokey, yeah. I mean, Nebraska has made a really strong push for him, and I think has made things maybe a lot more interesting than a lot of people thought they would. But he's going to use an official visit. Actually, his visit started today. He's on campus and will be on campus this week. And I just think when you look at all the advantages Texas has with him, you mentioned the relationship with Gary Patterson. He's from Manor. There's an immediate need for Texas to have an edge guy that can be an impact player from day one and can come in and start. Everything is trending Texas at this point. So if you're putting your money on where O'Shawn Mathis is going to end up, I think the smart money's very much on Texas right now.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it, buddy. Great to hear from you. Enjoy tomorrow. Jeff Howe, 247 covers sports. 247 Sports covers Texas, the Longhorn Blitz, also on the local radio, one of the local radio shows down there as well.